I've always worked in male dominated industries, actually. So I worked in real estate, then I worked in marine and shipping, I worked in IT manufacturer, I've worked in banking. So these are all pretty male dominated industries, but I never really felt held back by being a woman. And when I worked in marine and shipping, I remember it was my first week. One of the directors came up and all the directors were ex-captains who were very used to running their own ship and a bit old school, a lot of them. And he came into my office and said, "Oh, can you type this fax for me?" And I was like, "No." I was like, "You'd be quicker typing it yourself anyway." And he's like, "What?" And he went storming into the CEO's office. And then I got a call on my phone from the CEO saying, "Can you come into the office, please?" And so I was like, "Oh, here we go." So I went in and he said, so this man is telling me that you wouldn't type his fax. I said, "Yeah, my understanding was that my role was here to develop your marketing and branding. It had nothing to do with typing, and that's not something I'm good at." He goes, "Right, okay, can you come a bit closer?" So I came a bit closer. He held out his hand, shook my hand, and then said, "I never make the coffee either." And I was like, and it just sent such a clear signal to this other director that he was out of line. And I just loved that experience.
Hey, I'm Julia Lopez, communication architect, international speaker, author of Leading in High Heels, and your host. Welcome to Brave, Bold, and Brilliant podcast. Together with my guests, I will share with you inspiring stories where being brave and bold were the trigger to becoming brilliant. For the past decade, I've been helping professionals to express themselves with clarity and confidence in any stage and arena of their lives. Communication is key to success, and stories have the potential to transform lives and move people into action. There is someone, somewhere, who needs to hear exactly what you have to say. Be brave, bold, and brilliant, and speak up unapologetically. Hi, Melitta. It's a pleasure to have you here with me today, where you're going to reveal stories, your stories, when you have been brave, bold, and brilliant. Welcome.
Thanks, Julia. It's great to be here. And I love your title, Brave, Bold, and Brilliant. And I think that it's something that we don't recognize in ourselves enough. And so it's really great to have an opportunity to explore that a little bit here with you today.
Absolutely. And then you're right. Women, we tend to be too modest. And I'm with this brave, bold, and brilliant. And also the next tagline, speaking up unapologetically. I want to open this space for all the guests to be free to express themselves in whatever area they want to go into. So up to you.
Great. So I think I developed my voice quite late in my career, but now that was already like 15, 16 years ago. And so it feels like I was so young back then. But I was a classic like career girl, put my head down, worked hard. I built my career. I graduated from art school with a business degree, which I think always gave me a different outlook. I always saw things differently to other people. And in my early career, I worked for smaller companies. So I never really recognized that until I went into large corporate and then saw, oh, actually, I'm always looking for better ways to do things or different ways to do things, or how could this be better or different? And not in a critical way, but always innovating and trying to find the best solutions and the best ways forward. And that when I got into a corporate career, that outlook really helped me to progress quite quickly. And I did a lot of work with the senior leaders within one of the largest companies in the UK and Europe at the time. And it was, and I don't think I recognized then that it was being brave, bold, or brilliant. It was just, well, I had an idea and I wanted to share it, and I wanted to I could see a better way. And so I wanted to explore that with the senior leaders, which annoyed a lot of people and between me and them, because they're like, you can't just walk into the CEO's office with an idea. It's like, well, he invited me, so why not? And I didn't quite understand, but I think becoming from smaller companies where I was always just working directly with the CEO, that I hadn't really recognized the hierarchy you were supposed to observe in a corporate setting. So it annoyed a lot of people along the way. But then I made this is perhaps a brave and brilliant move, which I didn't recognize at the time. But there was one particular director I had, and he was like 3 levels above me, 2 down from the CEO who I went directly to, and he was not happy with that move. But what I did is I made a 1-page grid, and on that I told him exactly how I saw my role, what I saw as the business strategy that I was working towards making happen, and effectively wrote it in a way that showed him how I was going to make him look really, really good. And after that, he became my best friend. And even when I moved to Switzerland, he got in contact. He's like, can I come and stay with you? I was like, no.
that was very good. No.
No, I might have won him over won that battle, but no, he was not going to come and stay with me. But it was, it wasn't something I ever recognized. And it was only later in my career when I was working in Switzerland in private banking, and I managed to build my position up to report to the CEO there, that he became my mentor in the end as well, and pointed out that he said, do you know what makes you stand out as different to the others? I was like, no idea. And he said it was exactly that I was the only person that came into his office who had spotted a way to do something better and came up with a solution. Because plenty of people come in and tell me what doesn't work, but they never come up with a solution, a better idea that's been thought through and could be put into action straight away, because that never happens, and that's something you bring to the organization. So that was a nice moment to see how I was different, and to be able to appreciate that skill that I had, or that ability, or just the ignorance maybe to go and do that, but how that helped me stand out. But it was, so yeah, I'm always grateful he was just an amazing boss and mentor anyway. There's lots of ways he encouraged me and helped me grow, but that's always stood out to me, that encouraged me then to do more of the same. And I think we all have good ideas, but we don't always have the courage to go forward and say, look, why don't we do it this way and try this, and this is how it could work out. And we have them ideas, but we don't go forward. So I wanted to share that story to encourage more women to go for it. And there's an amazing book I read called Nice Girls Don't Get the Corner Office.
Oh, I wrote one. This is one of the little Bibles that we have sitting around, and we always have to go back to them.
It's fantastic. It's 101 ways women sabotage their own career. And one of them is, we don't ask. We don't sort of say, well, we ask for permission rather than just doing things. And I remember reading that. It's like, oh, well, maybe I should tell my boss I'm going for this quarterly meeting in another country, and I just need him to sign this form rather than asking permission. So I did, and he said, sure, okay. I was like, ooh, okay, that works. How else can I use this? And having the courage to stand up for yourself and speak up more in meetings, and all of these things that we tend to like work hard and just assume everyone's going to notice we're doing a good job. And in that book, they were saying, spend 80% of your time doing a good job, and then 20% of your time making sure people know that you've done a good job and that it's visible, because just doing a good job, it isn't enough. People need to be kind of pointed. It's like, did you see that I did there? It was really good. But you don't need to do it in a bragging way, but just in a I used to go to people and ask the directors after I'd worked with them on their communication or marketing plans, and ask them, well, what was the results? Did you see a difference? And that's a point where like, oh yeah, actually these things happened and this happened. It's like, great. So what are we going to do next time? And it helped them to build the credibility, and them to recognize that I was someone that got results for them. But as I said, not in a bragging way, but in a way that was very clear to them that it was myself and my team that were driving these results for them. They wouldn't have happened otherwise. So that definitely helped bring my team up to the CEO level, because I worked in private banking, but I did marketing and communications, which wasn't at banking, traditional banking role that was usually recognized at board level. So I felt really proud of that.
That's awesome, Melitta. Too many things there that I want to go a little bit back in something that you said at the very beginning, which I find that's fundamental. And nowadays is when, I would say nowadays, last couple of years, that this terminology, and this has been brought to business, art, creativity. We can only connect the dots when we look backwards. We have to live it first. And then when we pass the experience, we say, now I know why I behave this way, why I do that. And when you said like you had art degree and with business, mastering business, that then eventually you will be able to bring creative solutions for your business approach. And I find this fantastic because many people we know, they try to fit themselves in a box and believing that it will work that way without allowing them to explore what could be beyond the box.
Yes.
And I believe we both work with women. You help women develop their businesses, and also you in the communication as well. We have lots of things in similar. So we know the struggles that women face in business or in a career. And for me, I bring the aspect of the communication on how to express themselves in a way that is assertive, and then embracing the word assertive without the fear of being tagged as aggressive.
Yeah, I think that's a really important distinction to understand. And I love that you've brought up fear, because I think that's, one thing that my sort of art school, business school training gave me was the not to fear failure. And we would develop a plan, and then we had to rip it up. It was heartbreaking, but they were like, okay, rip it up now. Use those pieces to make something different. How else can you express that? How else could you communicate this? So we did leadership in a very different way with finger painting and all different things. But the idea was like, how do you bring out what's in you in a way that has meaning for other people and makes connection? And I think that's what communication is all about, is creating that connection. But to do that and to be credible, you have to have values and to stand by those. And I think that's where the assertiveness comes in, because as soon as I started to live by my values and make those clear to people in the way I spoke up and the way I acted, then that changed everything. Suddenly I became more credible. And I had one situation where I was in a meeting and I was pregnant at the time, but in the early stage where you can't tell anyone, and I had the most awful morning sickness. So I was just really concentrating on just being able to stay in that room and not leave. And so I wasn't really concentrating on the meeting at all. And then suddenly everyone just leaned forward and looked at me as like, what have I done? And then, aren't you going to say something to him? And it's like, oh, sorry, I drifted for a moment. I missed what happened. But someone had said something that they knew that normally, because of my views and values, that I would have said, no, we absolutely can't do that. Or I would have challenged them on that. And I thought, even though it was just an awful situation, I felt so proud that people had recognized what I stood for and what my team was stood for. And that was really important. And I think that's what being assertive is all about, is to say it's not being aggressive or pushy, it's being true to your values. And that's when you can really step into your leadership space and build that trust and credibility that you need to take your career or your business in whichever direction you want to. Without that, you can't really get very far in anything.
Absolutely, Melitta. That's the point. It's all about, on yourself, understanding who you are and what you stand for. And today I was talking to this with another group of women, women in technology, and they were explaining also the common challenges we know women face in the big corporation environment where their voice is not heard, literally. And one thing that I mentioned to them, I always believe we have to, everywhere we go, we need to sense, to understand the context. It's about a game. You cannot play a game without knowing the rules of a game. And in your corporate environment, in your business environment, there's a lot of rules and game playing that we need to learn. And we need to learn to check, to get to know who are the voices in that group and what kind of voices they are. Who are the people that are becoming our allies. And if there's strong male leadership, we immediately have to find the males on that strong group that can support us, that can open little doors for us where we can express our voice out there. I would love you to share with us your experience on that, because when you said that you, in a way, bypassed someone above you to talk to your CEO there, I believe that you had the sense that there was a path to go there, and you shared that strategically you told your person there, no, I'm doing this, but this is going to be good for you as well. Yeah. So tell us a little bit more about those kind of strategies.
Yeah, I've got a few there actually. So the first one goes back to when I was a kid, and it's not necessarily a strategy, but I think it's a belief, because our beliefs are formed when we're very young. And I remember I must have been about 7 years old, and I used to love going into the office with my dad. And my dad was the IT director for BACS, which is the bank's automated clearing system in the UK. So they cleared all the payments for all of the banks in the UK, and foreign payments coming in, of course, as well. So he knew all of the directors of all of the banks and all of the whole industry. He was well known. And we were walking down this corridor, and this really tall guy, well, to me, a really tall guy came walking towards us, and he bent down so he could talk to me. And then he was very nice, and then we kept going, and we went in my dad's office, and my dad closed the door, and he just looked at me. He just grabbed me and looked straight in my eyes. Said, when you go into an office environment, he goes, I don't know why, but you're going to come across men who think that you're not as good just because you're a woman. And he goes, I would love to be able to tell you why that is, because I've never understood it. But in those moments, I want you to remember that the guy that signs the banknotes got on his knees to speak to you. And now looking back, I was like, I don't even know if that story's true now, but it's become my self-belief, so it doesn't matter either way. And I think that has always, when I went into office and started working with Lynn, and there was a sales director in particular who was always like, but you can't do that, you're a girl. And I was just thinking, idiot, and completely ignored that. His views never permeated my values because I didn't believe what he said was true. And I reported direct to the CEO in that particular environment. It was a smaller company, and he was an amazing mentor, and he really believed in me. So it was that also helped me to ignore this sales idiot. And also my first two internships, one was with a Black theatre company, which was led by a woman. So you can't get more kind of, at that time particularly, you couldn't get more diverse and minority. And then I worked for a television production company that was entirely run by women, not on purpose, but they were just, just the women tend to be better when we interview them, and we can see how they can fit in the team. So we haven't consciously eliminated men, but I saw women in a leadership role from my first two experiences in an office environment. So I think those two things kind of my dad's experience and that my first experiences in companies helped me build that belief that as a woman, I wasn't going to be held back in business. And so that's what I brought forward. So I never thought that I was too junior or too female or whatever to make my voice heard. And if I had a good idea to share it, if I really believed in it. The other experience was when I worked, I've always worked in male dominated industries actually. So I worked in real estate, then I worked in marine and shipping, I worked in IT manufacture, I've worked in banking. So these are all pretty male dominated industries, but I never really felt held back by being a woman. And when I worked in marine and shipping, I remember it was my first week. One of the directors came up and all the directors were ex-captains who were very used to running their own ship and a bit old school, a lot of them. And he came into my office and said, "Oh, can you type this fax for me?" And I was like, "No." I was like, "You'd be quicker typing it yourself anyway." And he's like, "What?" And he went storming into the CEO's office. And then I got a call on my phone from the CEO saying, "Can you come into the office, please?" And so I was like, "Oh, here we go." So I went in and he said, So this man is telling me that you wouldn't type his fax. I said, "Yeah, my understanding was that my role was here to develop your marketing and branding. It had nothing to do with typing, and that's not something I'm good at." He goes, "Right, okay. Can you come a bit closer?" So I came a bit closer. He held out his hand, shook my hand, and then said, "I never make the coffee either." And I was like, and it just sent such a clear signal to this other director that he was out of line. And I just loved that experience as well. So I think I've been very fortunate to work with very good mentors who have really supported my position. And when I've stood up for myself and said, "No, I'm not doing that," they've recognized that and been willing to stand by me. So I'm really appreciative to all of those experiences.
That's amazing, Melita, to hear that. It everything is a process, but yes, you recognize that you had the support, a very strong support from your father, starting from there, but also from what I hear from you here, you by standing by your values, but knowing what you want and what you stand for and by, your focus is on that. And of course, I read once, or someone was saying, I don't remember exactly what was the situation, we're saying that we women, if we say, as you said, and I say as well, that I never felt intimidated or felt that I had to fight for something because of my gender. And I've been asked this several times. And in this conversation, this lady said, if you're saying that, is because you've been blind. And then my point was, it really took me to think about it. Have I been too naive and blind? I'm not denying that there are those situations with women that they face, that they are pushed back, however, again, I believe because I was so focused on where I wanted to go and understanding what was the dynamics to get there and who I would have to contact and connect to get where I wanted, that those other things were not in my view. They were not in my priority. So therefore, even if they would come, you would just say, I have no time for that. I just have to find my way around and through.
Yeah.
Right? Is that the same? Do you feel the same?
Yeah. I say I genuinely don't feel I was ever held back by being a woman. Maybe I could have got further if I was a man and I'm not aware of those possibilities. But as far as I'm concerned, that's irrelevant anyway. But one thing I never joined the women's networks because I was like, what do I want to go there for? And it just seemed like a bit of a cult and never got involved in it at all.
Social gathering instead of business. But anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, exactly. Until I moved to Geneva, started working in private banking there. And that was not just a male dominated industry. That was definitely, my view was that women were definitely being put down. They were not able to progress. They were invisible within the company. And that was an eye opener for me. That was the first time I'd really seen a oppression, I guess you could say. And that really annoyed me. And it was the first time as well that I'd come across women that weren't supportive too. That so I managed to build my role up, as I said, to report to the CEO within that organization, which was very rare in private banking and in Switzerland. And so I wanted to use that position to make a change. So I went to the CEO with my typical good idea, is that we should have a women's network. I've never wanted to join one before, but I kind of feel we need it here. There's such a clear old boys network. There's within the organization, but the women are excluded from that. I would love for us to bring the women together to discuss our challenges, see what we could do, bring in some external role models, perhaps do some workshops just to help them build their confidence so that they can stand forward and say, hi, I've got this good idea, let's do that, let's put this on the table, because we're really missing out. The CEO, as I said, he was a great boss, and he was like, he had felt that himself as well. He was also British, had moved over, but he didn't know what to do about it. And he said, as a middle-aged white man, I didn't really feel I was the right person to initiate putting some kind of women's network in place. So he gave me the backing. The CFO became my mentor for that organization and helped me to strategize that and move it forward. I didn't want it to be exclusive, so I opened it up for men as well. And I just loved that whole experience of bringing external role models in, really talking about the challenges. But what was really interesting to me, after running it for about a year, I went to the men that joined. Some of the men joined because they really wanted to help the women in their teams. A lot of the men joined because they knew that I reported to the CEO, the CFO was my mentor, and so if they came, it would look good. But I didn't care. They were there. They were getting exposure to everything and the challenges, so that it didn't really, why they came didn't really matter so much. But when I asked them, so what have you got from this? It was really interesting that most of them said it was the first time they've ever heard women speak up, the first time they've ever heard women in a leadership capacity. And there was one guy, and he said, I've always wanted to promote the women in his team. And he had a reputation as women of being extremely sexist. But he said he always wanted to promote them, but he didn't have the confidence that if they were in a meeting with other men or other like clients from people from different departments, that they would actually speak up and represent his department. But having seen women do exactly that, he had the confidence. He promoted two of the women in his organization, and when he left for an amazing job at another bank, it was those two women that he took with him, because they were the best performers by far. And we started to see a lot more promotions of women in the bank, because suddenly the male leaders, one, knew how to what they needed to be supported, and also they had that confidence in them for the first time. And that was really when I realized the importance of every woman speaking up. We sometimes, I don't know where the line is between what's the reality of us being like pushed down and ignored, and what's us just assuming that we don't have permission yet, and not, as Sheryl Sandberg says, we're not leaning in, we're not pulling up to the table and making our voices heard. So I don't know where that line is, but I think we can that's definitely something that's in our control, is to speak up more and have that courage and keep going with the keep pushing and making things happen for ourselves.
Absolutely. I'm so happy that you pointed this out, because it's exactly my call constantly. And interesting enough that you say that you got into building up this women's network in Switzerland. And I started dedicating and focusing on working with women when I was in Switzerland, because even if I was in Zurich, you in the French part, I was in the German part, I felt the same that you felt there. That most of my community, they were expats, but still like they were not given the opportunities. They're not really doors for them to open. And that is really tough, because then you see very qualified women just not finding the way to get through. And of course, to me, and from my own experience, learning how to express your needs, it's super important and crucial for you to start finding those doors as well.
Yeah.
Because if you don't know what you want and where you want to go, you are not going to find those doors. And I have a saying that I shared today with the other group, and they loved it, which was, I normally say that communication is the key to success, and I say that is the key, and leadership is the door. So you need the key to open that door. So you need to be able to communicate and to express ourselves.
Mm.
And I take here the opportunity to reinforce that for women. You also coach women in speaking. Well, you not only women, but let's focus here on the ladies here, in taking this opportunity to become a reference on their topic, on their message out there, become role models, become someone that other come for support, because that will help all the other women. Because I'm convinced that is a numbers game as well. At the moment there are more women in leading positions, more women speaking up, there's not going to be, oh, she's arrogant, or she is that and that. It's just normal. She's just speaking. And you mentioned another point that I want to reinforce here, is your men there, your CEOs, getting surprised seeing these women speaking up with confidence. And you know that I have my events, the All Summit, they Speak Up and Lead Challenge. But in the All Summit, there are always more women. Although men are welcome, but there are always more women. And in one of the events, one of the participants, a man, he came to me to thank me for the event. He said he enjoyed it a lot, like he had never been surrounded of so many women, that we have a different energy, that we are more caring, that we are more laughable, that is a different dynamics. And then he says, however, when there's a however, something's coming. However, he missed the femininity of those women on stage. I was really taken by surprise. And I said, what, really? He said, yes, they were very good, they were strong, they were assertive, but I missed the femininity. Okay, I took it. I said, well, thank you, I will think about it. And I did think about it, and I asked the other men there, including Marcus, my husband, and I asked other women there, and everybody else was kind of surprised with the remark. But then, thinking about the guy, he wasn't a young guy, on his 30s, and maybe the women there were more older, like they're around the average, or they were around their 40s. But for me, the point was, men need to see more women speaking up. Yeah. Because they need to understand that we have a different language of communication as well, but we can be also strong and assertive, and while be fun and feminine. That the concept of feminine is not to be submissive or being, I don't know what is his concept of feminine, because I find myself feminine. Hold on a second.
Yeah. It's funny, isn't it? You think, well, what does that even mean, to be feminine? If you're a woman and you're being yourself, well, that's it. You don't. And I think it's important not to embrace anyone else's view of what femininity is, and just to be yourself. And we were talking just before we went live about my podcast, and about where I interview women about how they got their business started, and what lessons they've learned along the way. And almost every single one of them has said that the moment things changed for them, as soon as they started to relax into their business, to start building success, it's the moment that they had confidence in who they were, and who they discovered what their purpose was and their why. And it's not always immediately obvious to people, but as soon as you make that connection with who you are, that's the moment things change. And I love I've forgotten his name, the drag queen guy. anyway, he was saying that on his masterclass recently, RuPaul, that's his name, that he really struggled with his confidence. And it was only the moment that he discovered who he was that he was able to have confidence. And then he realized, how can any of us be confident if we're not confident, if we don't really understand who we are? And I think that's a really strong point. How can you have a voice and believe in what you're saying if you haven't really identified who you are and what your values are and what you want to change in the world through your perspective and your talents? And I think whether you're male or female is just regardless in that whole process, personally. And I think one thing that I have learned actually from starting my own business 12 years ago versus when I was a career girl was, a career woman, I should say, was that we have a lot more control over our destiny and our future than we think. And it's only when you're kind of on your own and you have to make things happen that suddenly there's always a point where you discover you have to invest in yourself and you have to have help, a mentor, a coach, somebody who can help you to shine a light on your blind spots, but also your strengths as well, and to build those and just become you, and to discover what that is. And it's hard for anyone to do that on their own, I think. But I would encourage everyone, whether they have their own business or they're in a career, is to really take the time to discover who you are. And to have a voice, it doesn't necessarily mean that you have this one amazing signature story that you use, which is great on stage, but in a day-to-day setting, it's much more useful just to understand where you want to go, what your vision is, what you want to make happen, and how your talents can make that happen. And there's a great story, I won't go into it now because we haven't got time, but about there's a book called by Dr. Josephine Gross about the sacred feminine, and it's how trade came to being through feminine energy, because it was seen as a way to fulfill your potential. And I just love that concept that feminine energy is a way to fulfill your potential, to make things happen, to improve the communities around us. And that's what I think being feminine is all about.
Absolutely. Amen. That was very well said, Melitta. I fully agree with you. And one thing is about just to complement what you're saying is that the world will not change to make us happy. And I believe we cannot change people, but we can influence people towards a change. And the only way is when you become someone that you're aligned, your voice is clear, and your message is out there, that you inspire others to make the decision that they too can change. But if we want to change someone, and this is a kind of a pattern of behavior that many women have, that they are always trying to change the people around them, even with the best good intentions and more in the relationships. But this is how can I say, a ticket for failure. You can only change yourself. And with that change, that you transform yourself to your best version, that you blossom, that then you inspire others to do their own change, which is not the same, but their own, to embrace their own path of changing. And then is when transformation starts. Then is when I say, if you have to learn the rules of the game, you have to know where you are getting to, the context you understand the dynamics. And then once you connect it to your own voice and you understand those dynamics and you are accepted in that environment, then you can start being an agent of promoting change. But you cannot get any space and just try to change everything.
Yeah, 100% agree. I mean, change has to come from within, and by showing up and being your best self and having that confidence and consistency, then you give other people permission to do the same. And as long as you are respectful of the people around you and their values and what's meaningful for them and how they operate, then you can really create change, because diversity is is the key. And if we try and change everyone to be just like us and believe the same things, then that's not diversity at all. You know, that's not going to help change happen for the better at all. So it's really becoming your best self, but also giving people the space to become their best self as well. And it's definitely worth learning some core basic communication techniques and understanding how everybody communicates in different ways. Everyone has different needs from information, so that if you're not getting through, it's just because you're not communicating in a way that connects with them. So learn how to adapt your message to them, but don't change your message. Don't change who you are. And that's the way I think you can really start to have influence. But as you say so rightly, it all comes from yourself. We have to take that responsibility to be ourselves and to get our message across, but to learn what it takes to do that effectively.
We have to take the responsibility to grow.
Exactly.
And Melitta, and you have shared a lot with us in terms of your brave and bold actions. I loved that. And that led you to have brilliant results. And can you share, do you like to share a final thought before we wrap up?
I think I've had lots of people come to me and say, oh, I'd love to have your confidence, or I'd love to be able to do what you do. And it's so easy for you. And I just want to say it isn't. It's not easy for anyone. I was always labeled the shy girl growing up. I was always, I really struggled with my being an introvert to put myself out there, but it's only by consistently pushing outside my comfort zone I've been able to do that. It's been a very long journey, but in the moment it never, looking back, as you said it right early on, when you look back and you can connect the dots, it looks like just such a natural journey and it all makes sense. But in the moment, it never feels like that. And so I want to, and actually my word for the year, I always do my planning and I come up with a word that I'm going to live up to, that's going to be my sort of guiding star, if you like. And my word for this year was bold. And I thought, right, I'm going to be bold and I'm going to tell people that's my word, bold. And the number of people were like, finally. I was like, oh, really? You think I should have already been bold? I was like, yes. So I think when we have this tendency to look at other people and see them as just being like, oh, amazing, I could never do that, and putting ourselves down, where the reality is much more, we're all equal. I don't think any of us really recognize fully how bold and brilliant we are, but it's but just to recognize that, and to, if you listen to the interview, like, oh, I couldn't have done any of that, then, well, you could have, and you probably did in your own way. And so just to, even if you don't feel bold and brilliant in the moment, trust that you really are.
That's so awesome. Thank you so much, Melitta. It was such a pleasure talking to you, and it's always a pleasure talking to you. And with that, I'm not going to say anything else. You said it all. Thank you again.
Thanks, Telia. It's always great to talk about voice and communications. I could talk about it all day, but I think we've shared some good stories. You've really brought them out today, so that's great. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That's all for today. I hope you got inspired to raise your game and be brave, bold, and brilliant. Make sure you listen to my other podcasts. Stories are great sources of inspiration and transformation. Subscribe. Remember, there is someone somewhere who needs to hear exactly what I shared with you here today. Be generous and spread the word. Give your feedback and help grow this awesome community. Until then, be brave, bold, and brilliant, and speak up unapologetically.